Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quinten Krzysko, Sunny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And welcome back to another episode of Bears on Tap. And I just want to open this one up with just a quote from Keenan Allen. And I'm gonna say I didn't actually listen to the video of him saying this, so I don't know if it's the way he said it, but I'm gonna say it the way I think it should be said. I feel like we did enough as players to win the game. I'm joined by my good friend here, Ron Luce. Ron, how are you doing? What do you think of that quote? Where are you with this whole the Bears' ability to keep creating new ways to lose?
You know, Hugh, I have a perfect analogy for everybody because I tend to agree with Keenan Allen. I'm doing okay. For a variety of reasons. The Bears certainly being one of those reasons. Keenan Allen, I think, is 100% correct. I think the Bears did do enough as players to take care of business. And I think a perfect analogy for those at home is that of a furnace. You know, a furnace is a team. You know, you have a motor and you have various parts that do a specific job. And at my home in Chicago, Illinois, I think my furnace is doing enough as players on a day-to-day basis to produce heat in my house. The problem is I have that one freaking piece of my furnace right now, which I believe is one of the valves that's giving issues. And I have a house that's 55 degrees this morning. So I think that epitomizes the Bears beautifully, Q, because it is a work in progress, right? You have 95% of what feels like the machine going in your favor. And yet now this is 3 weeks in a row where a questionable coaching decision where, you know, I know there's people that are going to sit out there and say, well, do coaches really matter at the pro level? Yes, they do. In football, they do, especially in football. Football is a true team sport from staff to players to everybody else involved. This is the third straight week where something stupid has potentially cost the Bears another opportunity at a win. And all three of them were division games. It's not like they're getting blown out by these teams that are better than them in terms of the standings and the record. But still, they find a way to lose, just as my furnace finds a way to not produce heat. It's infuriating, Q, on multiple levels.
It's an outstanding analogy you have there. It's I was so surprised. I knew about your furnace, but I wasn't expecting the Eberflus to valve comparison, and I love it. I think it works great. But so I don't love what we saw Sunday. Like if we just we go through what happened in this game just on a quick, you know, kind of not drive by drive, but quarter by quarter basis. Like the Bears fall down 10-0 in the first quarter here. I believe that was first quarter. And it's like, okay, this is
3-0. And then the Lions quickly made it 10-0 at the start of the second.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, really for the whole first half, I don't feel like we need to litigate that much about what happened in the first half. It was just like Bears offense had 3 and outs. Lions moved the ball down the field, got mostly limited to field goals because apparently the Bears defensive strategy is, hey, we can give up yards, but at least we'll hold them to field goals instead of touchdowns. You know, like, which, I mean, you can feel how you want to feel about that. I'm still sitting here saying I would love to have a defense like the Arizona Cardinals or Minnesota Vikings do right now, mentality-wise. But it is what it is. So you don't change that stuff mid-season. So Bears go into half down 16-0. Then second, and you know, it's Thanksgiving. I don't know about everyone else out there. I'm at my parents' house. There are about 20 people there, about 5 of whom are actually Bears fans because I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's kind of like, okay, well, if this is going to be that ugly, like I'm not going to pay full attention to it. I got a turkey to carve over here. I've got a prime rib to carve over here. I got stuff to do. So I've got But yeah, we do a very nice Thanksgiving here. It's always
I can see
delicious.
that. Hell yeah.
But so the TV's on, but I'm busy. I'm cutting meat. I'm cleaning up, getting plates ready, stuff like that. But I look up and I see Keenan Allen get hit for a real nice touchdown. It's like, okay, 7-16. There's something here. And someone who's here who is a Lions fan keeps coming up to me going, they're making me nervous. They're making me nervous. And I'm like, okay, they have a chance to get back in this. Then give up another touchdown. Game shifts back to the Lions. Bears get a touchdown, go for 2, don't get it. But at this point, we're talking 13-23 in the fourth quarter, 5 minutes left. Caleb hits DJ Moore for one of the best throws I've seen all year. He doesn't have room to step into this throw. He doesn't even have room to follow through on it. He's almost shot putting it 30 yards, perfect loft, right into the front corner of the end zone for DJ. Just gorgeous. So Bears are down by 3. 5 minutes left. This is anyone's game. And Bears force, was it 3 and out? Yeah, Bears force a 3 and out. Get the football back with 3 minutes, 31 seconds left. And they drive all the way to the Detroit 25 with 46 seconds left. They're in easy field goal range. They still have a timeout in their pocket. You're thinking they could win this in regulation, right? Like, don't give Eberflus the chance to blow this in overtime or the field goal unit a chance to blow it. Let Caleb Williams go win it. The first play from this 25-yard line, penalty. Legally used to hands on Tevin Jenkins, it was a clean penalty, right? Ron, did you remember that play, Ron?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, it was he got him. Yeah. It was pretty clear. So you're backed up to the 35 now, still field goal range-ish indoors. And this is kind of where I start to have a question of, how much is Cairo Santos worth the money when you're backed up to the 35? You're talking about a 52-yard field goal with him indoors. It's questionable. With a lot of kickers, you feel pretty good about that. So that's aside from the main issues here today. But that is something that I always kind of have some level of, I don't want to say disdain, but concern over Santos being your kicker is when you're at 50. Sure. It's not like, oh, well, he can do it. It's, can he do it? But either way, Caleb takes a sack here. And I don't, at first, I thought Detroit just schemed up a heavy blitz and got free runners on both sides. And that's not what happened when I saw a replay. It was just, I think it was Larry Borum just utterly blew his block. Braxton Jones got his guy a little, but not enough. And it allowed 2 free guys into the backfield on only a 4-man rush. Like, that's unacceptable. Yeah. But so now you're talking, okay, 31 seconds, Detroit 41. Yeah, I get 6 yards to get back into iffy field goal range. So you still have a chance. Caleb seems to be communicating a bunch of stuff. He's, waving his hands over his head saying, where's the play? Where's the play? I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you? Finally, the Bears get in the play with, according to Caleb, about 13 seconds left on the clock. And Ron, at this point, if you were a coach, any coach, head coach, offensive coordinator, well, I guess offensive coordinator's in the booth. So we're really just going head coach. Don't you think you should say that clock hits 10, we're calling a timeout?
Oh, 100%. I think here what the most infuriating thing is, and I will say this, I understand what Eberflus is commenting on after the game, saying he thought that what they wanted to do, which was run another play, then call the timeout, and then figure it out. I think that makes sense. But once shit goes wrong and Caleb can't hear something, or Caleb, you can just clearly tell they're not getting up to the line fast enough, you have the timeout in your back pocket. It's one thing if you don't have a timeout, then you're just like, hey,
hell, if you were to take even, because I could argue, and I'm not saying that this is the most, like, it's absolute, but you could argue you're better off taking the timeout at 31 seconds, running a play. You have time to get up for a spike. Doesn't matter if you get out of bounds or not. Like you had that in your pocket too. That was an option, and you chose aside from it. I'm not big on getting into the semantics of clock management, just because my brain doesn't work well with it. I think I would be Matt Eberflus out there on Sunday because it's not what I do well. Thank God I'm not the Bears head coach though. But I think that there were options there, and you chose the wrong one, whether that be fair or not. And because you chose the wrong one, you made it that much worse by not mitigating the disaster of it, because it was disaster mode. Whether it was the mic was out or the radio wasn't working, or whether maybe it was Thomas Brown just being unsure of what to do, what play he wanted. There's multiple variations of what could have happened there. I didn't think Caleb threw anyone under the bus with the way he described it, but man, except for maybe Eberflus, because that's probably earned at this point. Because I mean, hell, you listen to Eberflus's presser, he kind of tried to throw Caleb under the bus with it. So it's time for this guy to get out of here. And I want to talk one more quote that came out from all this, which was from Caleb. And quote, "We got lined up, got the play, and then I made an adjustment because I saw the clock running down, knowing that if we complete a ball in bounds, we don't have time to kick a field goal." Mm-hmm. Like by the time they're getting up to the line and it's at 13 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it was he said, he's right. You don't have time to get up and spike it anymore. And you have that timeout, but like the play might take that full 10 second. I mean, I forget where they snapped the ball. I want to say it was under 10 when they
started 6 seconds left that they snapped the ball. Or 9
and so
seconds.
That's why he audibled it to a play for the end zone, because it was like, we don't have time for any of this. And I don't know, maybe that does beg the question. I gotta go look and see a replay of the final play, because if they were just trying to get a 5-yard out or something and the clock was at 10, you could do it and get out of bounds. Or even if you don't get out of bounds, you have the timeout, so you could run it. But it's part of that question is probably with the way the O-line had been playing on that drive, how much do you trust that you don't have to create? And it's just I guess it's almost a lack of communication of what's the hierarchy of risk that we're taking.
Right. And I think they're first off, comment section blowing up already. Appreciate everybody jumping in with us this morning. Tim's got a couple of points here that I want to say. He says, if you call a timeout at 10, you're going for a Hail Mary. I don't think that's correct at all. You can run a play in 4 seconds. Caleb offensive personnel, OCD to share some blame too. I totally agree. Only one receiver ran to the end zone, committed a 5-yard out. So this is I think where, for those that are trying to, and Tim, not calling you out here, just trying to pin blame in other places. Head coaches get paid a ton of money for a reason. At the end of the day, you have to be the one to overrule everyone in the event that something isn't going right. Do you think Dan Campbell wouldn't overrule Ben Johnson if they're trying to do something like that? And he can clearly tell that his young quarterback isn't able to get into a situation to succeed. Yeah, you call the timeout. You have it in your back pocket for a reason. And then you adapt. I think that's the thing everybody's saying here. Well, you could make the argument everybody fucked up. Yeah, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to, if
one guy wears it.
Right. If you're watching this as Eberflus, because remember, Eberflus has a headset on. He hears everything that gets communicated on the field or from the booth or whatever. He hears everything. If he can hear and Caleb's like, yo, we need to talk this over, call him back to the sideline, then you can communicate to Caleb through your headset, right? It's damage control. Not everything's going to go according to plan. That's just the nature of the beast in the sport, in the league. That's just the nature of the beast. Not everything's going to go according to plan. For example, this football game didn't go according to plan. You were down big. It should have been bigger at the half. And good on Thomas Brown and the offense to whatever adjustments they made at halftime very clearly worked, because you scored 3 times in the second half. That's fantastic. Good job. You did your job. I think overall the rest of the game was fine. And then, of course, I think that the thing too here, and this comes from the top down with Eberflus, is the discipline. They did not have any discipline in this game. Some penalties were bad. I don't think this officiating crew was that great for either side, if we're being brutally honest.
I think they called it poorly both ways, though, which made it more palatable in my mind.
They did. They called it poorly for both teams, but very poor nonetheless. But at that point, you have to just be able to say, holy shit, something's not going right here, right? If you're just watching the clock bleed. No. Time. Whoa. And if Caleb comes back and he says, hey, I was trying to do. No. That's why we called the timeout. All right. Let's talk this shit over. Let's figure this shit out. And Tim, understand, agreed. He's saying, no, he should be, not saying he shouldn't be fired. Offensive players are a lot to blame as well. Yes. But at the end of the day, the head coach is the head coach for a reason. He needs to understand in that moment that something's not going according to plan and make the proper call and adjustment. And sometimes it's just as simple as saying, whoa, let's step back. Let's take the time out. Let's breathe and reconcile. Because here's the thing. Let's say you call the timeout with 14 seconds, right? Just hypothetically speaking. That's at least 2 plays, maybe 3, if you do it smart. Then all of a sudden the 5-yard out to commit probably works. And then you get a couple more yards. Maybe you can run another 5-yard out. Or if they give you distance because they decided to go the Matt Eberflus route against Washington and just back everybody off, maybe you're able to hit a Dunze or Keenan or DJ up the sideline for 10 yards. And then all of a sudden you're in range where Cairo's either got an easy field goal, or if you want to be really ballsy, you can take a shot at the end zone, right? I think it's just there was too many moving parts for Eberflus to not call timeout and just figure shit out. And sure, it's 3rd and 26. Great. It doesn't excuse not calling the timeout. At the end of the day, you got to play damage control. You have to. You have to play damage control. If you can clearly see that Caleb's not getting the call, just call timeout. Because now you're putting everybody else in a bad situation. The head coach's job is to put everybody in the right situation as often as humanly possible. Right? That includes your coaching staff. That includes your players. Sometimes just taking a step back and saying, guys, let's breathe and let's get everything where it needs to be is the right call. And then if the players don't execute, that's not on you. And that's fine. But you don't even give your players a chance to execute properly because, and again, sure, yes, everybody's going to wear some blame because we want to blame everybody because fuck the Bears. At the end of the day, Eberflus needs to do the right thing. And he didn't. And this is what? How many games now? Scott dropped the numbers earlier. 221 coaches have coached 20-plus career games that were decided by 7 points or fewer. Matt Eberflus's 227 win percentage, which is 5-17 in those games, is 221st among those 221 coaches.
It's unbelievable.
If the game's close, it's like Eberflus's brain short circuits. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's what's in the water. Maybe it's the hits principle. I don't know. But something's clearly not going right. And I think, again, that's where this is just infuriating because your offense gave you a chance late in the game. Your defense gave you a chance late in the game with the big 3-and-out. You had the opportunities. The refs probably blew it where they should have had better field position. Torrey Taylor out there being a champ trying to argue that homeboy had his foot on the line when they downed it at the 1. Everybody's tried to make it happen. And you need all the parts of the furnace to create heat. And when one's not working, it's not going to fucking work. And with Eberflus at the helm, it's very clear that one part is not going to fucking work. And that's the problem.
And I want to go to this comment from Hank Rodriguez here saying Flus isn't just bad. He's extremely unlucky too. And I can't help but think of the age-old saying that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And ultimately, I feel like that is extremely true for NFL head coaches. And I think there's some level of preparation, opportunity, and willingness to be flexible in your methods or in your in your theory of what can work and what can't work. Because to me, I look at this and say, if they were prepared to take a timeout and had a true, I am sure a lot of NFL teams have a true safe valve there of, hey, assistant head coach, when you see that clock hit 10, you call timeout every time. I don't care. I don't care the situation. If you see it hit 10 and we are down by 3 points or more, you call that timeout because we need a chance to win the game. They weren't prepared for that. The opportunity showed itself. They weren't prepared for it, or they weren't flexible in their ability to say, we need to pivot, and we trust our ability to figure out how to pivot because we have smart people in the building figuring that out. I do think they have smart people in the building. I just don't think that their head man sees it that way as like, we can pivot here, which is an issue.
I think that's something that we've seen at different points this season, right? You've heard Eberflus in these press conferences every single time there's a quote unquote questionable decision made, saying we believed in our process and we believed in our decision making. We believed in this and believed in that. I'm glad you believed in what you were doing. That's the first thing that you need to be able to do, is believe in what you're doing. But the second thing is, to your point, sometimes to me, and this is what baffles me about the sport, specifically football, at the head coaching position, the thing that will kill you the fastest is stubbornness and an ego. It will kill you faster than you can imagine. Look at Urban Meyer, for example. Probably one of the stubborn, most fucking just egotistical assholes ever. And what happened in his less than one season running a team? He burned a team into the ground in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. You have to be flexible. I think that's why, Q, you see a lot of these quote-unquote role players or guys who didn't make it to the league as big-time players become great coaches, because there's no ego attached. They know that you got to get the job done. You got to be technically sound. And sometimes shit ain't going to go the way you expect it to, right? You're happy to get to the league as a player, but maybe you want to be the star. Dan Campbell was never the star on any team that he played for. He had a good NFL career by longevity and all those standards, but he's a guy that gets it. He gets mentality, he gets flexibility, he gets empowering the people around him, and Eberflus does none of those. None of them.
Yeah.
And he is very stubborn in, he will never admit if we should have maybe done X, Y, or Z different. And I don't know if that's just a game for the press and he turns around and says something different in the meetings with his coaches and players, or if he's just that way. And if that's the case, that's how you lose a locker room. That's how you lose a fan base, which, as we sit here and everybody who has kindly joined us in the comments section this morning is reminding us, you're going to quickly lose everybody if you can't adapt and adjust. And you're also going to lose football games too, which is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, truly. I mean, I believe I'm not here today to talk good things about Matt Eberflus, but I do believe he is a good talent evaluator and he's a good developer of young football players. I think those are two things that he can hang his hat on. And that, to me, screams now in hindsight like a college coach, right? A guy who could find the talent and grow it within his program. But when you start adding 30-year-old future Hall of Famers into that picture, when you start adding, number one overall generational QB prospects, as opposed to in Indy, it was DeForest Buckner, who's a star, but that's Eberflus' star. It's on his defense. And a bunch of guys who he grew homegrown. Mm-hmm. It's very different. It's a very different aspect there. And I think that's something that has really flipped this thing in Chicago. The amount of veteran voices, veteran leadership voices in this locker room asking questions that Eberflus might not have answers to and might not be willing to find answers to. I think that has been a big issue within this Bears team this year, and it's got to change. And I think the only way you change that is moving on from Eberflus. But Ron, if you're moving on from Eberflus, what's the move?
Well, I agree with some of the rumors and reports. Now, whether you agree with those rumors and reports, that's not what I'm trying to argue here. And for those that might be confused at what I'm alluding to, I will fill you in. Again, I don't know the validity of these. I don't want to sit here and pretend these are sound and concrete and a brick wall in terms of impenetrable. I don't think that's the proper pronunciation, but I'm trying, folks. Of whether or not it's real, but this is the report. Is that assuming Eberflus is dismissed, which it sounds like it could be this weekend. It sounds like Saturday's the magical day. So I don't know. Depending on how this weekend shakes out, everybody here might be hearing from Bears on Tap once again this weekend, but we'll see about that. Regardless, it sounds like Eric Washington would become the interim head coach. And I do, I think that's the right move in hindsight. I really loved what Sunny and a couple of our loyal commenters said when we discussed the topic of who would be the interim HC. I want Thomas Brown, just worry about being Thomas Brown and just worry about being Caleb's guy. Like, that's all I want you to worry about the rest of the season, because there's nothing more important to the rest of this Bears season at this point than ensuring Caleb develops properly. And Thomas Brown's got a good thing going as the OC. I tend to agree with a lot of people's thoughts of adding more responsibility to his plate as an interim head coach is probably not the right move. I think you can evaluate Thomas Brown as an offense coordinator if you do have any intentions of him becoming your future head coach. But I think Eric Washington, because of how much he's respected around the league, he's been around a long time. I believe he's worn the assistant coaching head coach hat before. So he kind of knows the ins and outs and responsibilities. There's a reason Eberflus hired him to be the DC, right? Like, there was very clear intention of why he was brought in to be that guy. I think he would step in and become your interim HC, and I think that's the proper move because he's got the veteran respect. He's been around this league a long time, and I think he's probably one of the guys on that defensive side of the football that has the defense kind of in line. And he can call the defense and still assume the head coaching responsibilities the rest of the way, assuming Eberflus is dismissed. And then, like I said, you can just let Thomas Brown be Thomas Brown and make sure that offense hums on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, the timing of this really sucks, I think, because I really want to see Thomas Brown given the shot. Given the shot at some point. I'm just not sure 3 weeks of OC is enough for me to say that makes sense. And that makes sense for him. It makes sense. We know what he is as an OC now, and we got to see it as a head coach. I lean towards saying Thomas Brown should get it because I think you have a lot to learn from Thomas Brown getting it. I don't think you have a lot to learn from Eric Washington getting it. And it's because ultimately, I don't think there's many worlds where Thomas Brown is not the Bears head coach and he's back with the Bears next year. I just don't. I don't know why if I'm Ben Johnson and I'm getting hired by the Bears, why the hell am I keeping Thomas Brown on staff? I'm the play caller. Why does Thomas Brown want to stay here if Ben Johnson is calling plays? The same can be said for Drew Petzing or Wes Phillips or any offensive guy that you want. I think You're looking for an offensive head coach. I don't know why Thomas Brown would stick around for that when he's going to have play calling opportunities elsewhere as long as the play calling keeps looking good. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with it. I hate how early this is pushing their hand on it. I wish Thomas Brown was the Bears offense coordinator from week 1. That would have been really nice. He interviewed for the spot. They liked Shane Waldron better, but
I would make the argument. I would make the argument that if Thomas Brown was the OC from week 1, are we in the same discussion come week 13 of NFL football? I don't know if we are. And again, hindsight's obviously easy to sit here and be like, well, he's done it well the last 3 weeks. It's like, well, but if their record is flipped and they're 8-4, we're not sitting here talking about Eberflus getting fired. We're talking about another year of Eberflus at this point with Thomas Brown pulling the ones and twos and us potentially losing Thomas Brown to a head coaching job because of how good he did as an OC, right? It would be such a flip-flop conversation in terms of where things would be. We'd be talking about playoff football potentially. But I agree. Unfortunately, when a coach is going to get axed, there just is no... how do I put it? There's just no good way of going about it, right? Nobody wins at the end of the day. It's a bad situation no matter what. The only thing it really helps with, for in this case the Bears, is you get a jump start on evaluating the head coaching prospects coming into the season. You're not having to do everything come Black Monday when most head coaches get fired. You're already taking advantage of it. You're in the same boat as teams like the Saints, who have already fired their head coach. And you can now sit there and evaluate what's going to be available, who you want to interview, and you have a plan well before everybody else does, which in theory should put you in the driver's seat. Now, again, the Bears are going to bear, and we'll have to find out if that really becomes the case here. But it's gonna be something interesting. Jay with an interesting comment here, and sorry, Jay, we realize the X comments are showing up at the top of our scroll, so have not been ignoring you, sir. But he says, how confident are we that Flus even gets fired? Because he says he's betting Flus finishes the season. Do you have any inkling? Because I'll tell you what, I'm not going to lie. As much as I like the reports that sound like Eberflus is going to lose his job, and I hope that's what happens, there's a small part of me that goes, and that's what's.
I mean, they kept Trestman. That was about as ugly as it gets, and they kept him. I don't think the locker room's in the same shape as that, but I think you have enough veteran voices who are leading this locker room right now, because I don't think the locker room is in a poisonous spot. I think the coaching staff, I think the players have kept it that way in spite of a coaching staff that probably deserves that, or a head coach who probably deserves that. But I think this is the first time, like when it was all going on with Matt Nagy, I didn't expect much. It was like, yeah, what do you have to gain from it? And that's the standpoint I always go with this. What is there to gain from firing the guy? With Trestman, even, what was there to gain from firing him? Like at the end of the day, what are you achieving? Or maybe with Nagy, what you were going to see if Sean Desai was a head coaching candidate. Like, what are we talking about here? But with this one, with Thomas Brown, I feel like there is something to gain. And this is the first time with the Bears that I've really felt that way, that there is something to gain by firing Eberflus and putting someone else in the head coach spot, because Brown, the way that stuff is trending, will be in head coach interviews this year. He will. And you have a chance to get the best access, the best on-the-job training, on-the-job prove-it mode that you can for him. Now, where that becomes tough is I don't know if it goes badly, how can that impact Caleb?
Right.
That's the question that I don't have an answer for, but that's the risk to me. If I'm putting Thomas Brown in the head coach spot, how could I be potentially hurting Caleb Williams?
And I think that's the reason that you hear the reports the way they are, and what the risk is let Eric Washington handle all the ones and twos that come with being a head coach, and just let Thomas Brown keep being Thomas Brown. I think you can still learn a lot, though, in this process, Q, to your point about Thomas Brown, because maybe Thomas Brown becomes your assistant head coach for the rest of the season. And he still gets to kind of dabble and get his fingers wet and his toes wet and dip them in the water without fully assuming the full-on responsibility of what it takes to be a head coach in the NFL, and get some of that on-the-job training. Maybe you are leaned upon more to help develop, both offensive and defensive game plans as an assistant head coach, right? I'll tell you what, in my experience in football, there is nothing more valuable than a player that knows the other, or somebody that knows the other side of the football, helping the other side of the football, right? I played in college for a defensive coordinator that played wide receiver in his day. He was a good DC, though, because he knew what was going to be able to penetrate an offense. And he's done so well, he's now at the Division II level, leading a program as their DC. I think there's something to be said for, even if Thomas Brown assumes like an interim assistant head coaching role with the potential firing of Flus. I think either way, he gains more responsibility, because they're going to just have to do it as a coaching staff, right? But I still think what you said applies, Q. It is still kind of and maybe even for Eric Washington. What if this Bears team runs not saying they're going to, I'm not trying to get anybody excited, because I'm not going to try to get myself excited.
The Rich Bisaccia special?
Yeah. But like, what if they run the table with Eric Washington and Thomas Brown kind of leading the way? Are both of them all of a sudden like head coaching candidates? I know Thomas Brown's going to be. Does Eric Washington at least get a few interviews as a result of that? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think he might get an interview or two.
Sure, right? So I think that's where maybe that the front office looks at this and says, hey, maybe we can get a 2-for-1 special here. Let Eric Washington be the interim head coach. Let Thomas Brown be the assistant head coach. Ensure that they collaborate and kind of co-game plan some of this stuff the rest of the way. And then if you're Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, you just sit back with your legs crossed and go, all right, show us what you got, because this is your coaching interview for the rest of the season until we start getting other names involved in the conversation come, Black Monday.
Yeah.
I think there's still a way, Q, to your point, because I agree. The franchise, if I'm Ryan Poles, knowing my job is probably safe at this point, let's be honest, your biggest concern is Caleb Williams not being stunted because of any decision that's made. But I think you can kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can still give Thomas Brown more responsibility while still letting him be the guy as the OC, and kind of evaluate both of your coaches that are kind of helping co-run the team at that point for the remainder of the season.
Yeah. And I think there's probably an aspect here too of like losing does have a degrading effect on your locker room and on the players. And Trestman and Nagy and John Fox in there. Maybe John Fox is the closest to Eberflus, but I don't feel like either of those three coaches were directly losing the Bears games in ways like this. Like they are. Eberflus is probably the most impactful coach, the coach who wears the most blame on in-game decision-making losses than any of those last three Bears coaches I'm thinking about. So that has to weigh in on this factor too, I think, as something that you have to gain from it, because I mean we're talking about, for the last 6 games, just brutal clock management and discipline across the team in moments that should be pretty easy, costing you games. So, which going into that, I want to bring up another one of Jay's comments here. Where does yesterday's loss rank in the last 4 games? I'm thinking of this as the Commanders, the Packers, the Vikings, and the Lions game. If you have to rank them, Ron, what order are you putting those in from least painful to most painful?
I think the Washington one is still the most painful. I think it's going to remain that way. It would take something pretty catastrophic and stupid for that one to be supplanted, in my opinion. I also think the Packers one is right up there as well, because it's the Packers. Like, I would almost put the Washington Commanders and the Packers as like 1 and 1A. I think they were about equally as painful for different reasons. I would put this one above the Vikings game, though. I will say that, because the Vikings game, it was a little bit of luck to get you back in it, right? And over time, you never know what happens. Like, the fact that they even pushed it to an extra period is impressive. Again, with my thought process in mind, I tend to agree with Scott from Iowa here. Washington Packers, for me, are neck and neck. Not necessarily in this order like Scott's saying, but I would put the Lions over the Vikings for sure, because this game, even in the first half, when you're down 16-0, like, you're only down 2 possessions. You, myself, and Sunny were chatting about it back and forth during the halftime of like, how is this not a 4-possession game right now? The fact that it was even within 2 possessions was a miracle in itself. And then they turned around and came back and made something of it in the second half. I think that's where the pain comes in more, because you really do look at, like, they had the ball in crunch time at the end of the game. Like, you have the chance to dictate the outcome, not the other way around, where in the Vikings game you needed to score and then you needed to pray to whatever football gods you believe in that the onside kick was going to work. And it almost didn't work. Thank God for the Vikings being stupid. And then you got to, pray for Caleb to make the number 1 throw in my new spank bank of highlights. And then you send it to overtime at that point, right? So I think the Lions one is number 3 of those 4 for me, knowing that Packers and Washington are kind of neck and neck.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree. Like, Vikings was least painful. Then this Lions game is next on the list. But I actually put the Packers one ahead of the Commanders by a decent amount, just because that game pulled something out in me that has been dormant for years of of hate towards the Packers, and I've been shoving it down for years and ignoring it, and it came back up because it was like they might win this, and then for it to end that way, that just it killed me. So the Packers one is because fuck the Packers, exactly.
Just like Jay said, nails it there.
Yeah. So, but Ron, I think we're gonna keep this episode a little bit on the shorter side here, as Black Friday's coming up. But do you have any final thoughts?
Ooh, Caleb Williams is my baddest man. My nicest man continues to be cornerback 2. Actually, no, my nicest man is Matt Eberflus. Leave him in Detroit. I think our 3 keys to victory made a lot of sense, right? I think we need to give some credit.
We can run through those real quick if we want.
Yeah, let's run through those real quick.
Let me get them pulled up here. And I feel like going through full segments of baddest man, nicest man. This one is just, it's hard. It's not hard. Really what mattered in this game.
100%. We got to at least play the one that we're going to talk about, right?
Keys to victory.
I mean, obviously, this was another game where they didn't win that we're talking about this, but I think we nailed it again, Q. I think we're on a bender here. We just need them to get over that hump. They made Jared Goff's life a living hell for most of the day. He didn't look very again, right? The run game is really what kept the Lions in this game. Caleb,
which shockingly, I'm surprised how well the Bears stopped their run game in the second half. I thought they were going for 300 plus in the ground in this game.
Yeah, they really made some good adjustments in the second half to force the Lions' hand to make Jared Goff try to make plays through the air, and then they made his life a little more difficult. It felt like it took them forever to dial up the blitz, but they finally got there.
But so on our keys to the game, the first one was let Caleb Williams be Superman. And I put in parentheses in moments, don't just give him carte blanche to do whatever he feels like, because that's kind of what Shane Waldron did. And that's not the way to do it. But just letting him take over in the moments, as we saw in the previous week when Thomas Brown told him, be Superman. This is your moment to shine, go shine. And Ron, how do you think that this key got filled in today?
Yeah, he looked like Superman. He's also, he's your rookie passing touchdown record holder. He's your rookie passing yard record holder now in back-to-back weeks. I mean, he had 3 passing touchdowns in this game. He didn't throw a pick once again. He looked like Superman, especially in that second half. It really, something clicked in that offense. I love whatever adjustments they made at halftime. I think they took a lot more calculated shots with the outside corners because it was a little more man-to-man. And they were saying, hey, we're just going to go beat these corners because your number 1 corner and Davis is not playing today. Mm-hmm. And they took advantage of that. And you saw it, right? Keenan, that first off, that route on the second touchdown was just it was gross. It was beautiful. But I mean, they dialed everything up beautifully, and Caleb was Superman when he needed to be. You mentioned the throw to DJ Moore. I think that's a perfect example of that. Oh, I can't step into this. Oh, I can't even follow through all the way. But let me just shot put this bitch 30 yards downfield for a perfectly placed ball for DJ Moore, who I would like to note too. I know it was last week's key to victory, but Sunny saying just get the ball to your playmakers. DJ Moore got targeted 16 times in this game, even though he only had 8 catches. That's pretty cool and tough, if you ask me. Nonetheless, Caleb was Superman at moments when you needed him to be. And again, there's a reason that they had a chance to win this game. And I think it's largely because of Caleb in the offense's play in the second half.
Yeah, I definitely think that Caleb achieved that one in the offensive game plan, achieved it, especially, really all in the second half. They just felt like they kind of let the leash off and just said, hey, we need you to do that Caleb thing, that Caleb Superman thing. Go do it. And he did. Go
do that weird thing that you do.
Yeah. That thing where you score touchdowns. Yeah, that's fun. Second key to the game was to play clean football. And this was called it clean quality football. It sounds obvious, but it needs to be said. when the Bears are losing games because of special teams gaps, poor communication from coaches, and rotating pieces in the secondary. Playing clean football needs to be a point of focus because they haven't done it much this year. They accumulated more penalty yards than their opponents 7 times this season before this game. I think it made it 8 times with this game. The blocked field goals, the Hail Marys, I ended this one saying the standard is the standard, and the way the Bears have been playing is well below it.
Well put.
How do you think they lived up to that one?
I think from a penalty standpoint, this did not fulfill that. I think they were not disciplined. I think they, continued to just, continue to almost gift the Lions yards at times, it felt like, because of some of these penalties. But I really like what they did in terms of protecting the football, right? The offense, yes, you had a lot of 3 and outs, but you didn't turn the ball over. And in the second half, Caleb, with all those didn't turn the ball over. I know there was a couple of close ones, but close only works in horseshoes and hand grenades. It looked good, right? On that aspect, the defense took the ball away more than the offense gave it away. If you're talking in terms of the hit principles, you won in that turnover battle, which was great. Mm-hmm. But the lack of discipline will kill you just as quickly. Discipline is the slithery snake in the grass that you don't see, but when you step on it and you don't respect it the way you need to, it's going to bite you in the ankle. And that's exactly what happened here for the Bears, because those penalty yards made a huge difference. And it felt at times, even in the first half, the Bears had a chance to get out of a drive, and a stupid penalty would keep the Lions alive and give them another shot at points. And yes, the defense bent and not braked and let field goals instead of touchdowns. But what if this was a 1-possession game after the first half? Penalty yard difference. So I think to answer your question, Q, I think there was elements of it they did well, but I'm going to give them an average grade here because I don't think they did everything well. I think I think they did some of it was good with no notes. There was other parts of it that they clearly need to work on. It's kind of a C grade, maybe slightly below C, just because they lose this game too. So we can put it probably a little below passing, but they're right there. They're doing the right things. They just need to be a more disciplined football team.
Yeah. And then so our final one here was to make Jared Goff uncomfortable. And this one, last 2 games against Chicago, Goff totaled under 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 6 sacks. Last year, the Bears had Goff's number, it seemed like. And I do think the Bears are a bit of a boogeyman for Jared Goff. In 2018, he was on that MVP run, comes to Chicago, stinks, isn't the same the rest of the season. And then it's really the next 3 years of his career are not the same after that Bears game. There has to be something about the Bears, and I think specifically Soldier Field, that is always in the back of his mind of, oh no. I thought Kirk Cousins was very similar with that, I thought. But I do think Goff has a little, I don't know, I think they're very similar quarterbacks at the end of the day, but I think Goff has a little more oomph to him than Cousins does, if that's a logical way to put it. But
it makes sense.
Do you think that by limiting Goff to 221 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but only 1 sack, how do you think the Bears handle making him uncomfortable?
I think they did well. So I know the stat line is deceiving because I too have that in front of me. 21 of 34 for 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and you mentioned the 1 single sack. I think the key with Goff is that Goff thrives off of a few things. The run game being successful because it opens up the play action game for Goff to make plays downfield, especially with guys like Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And now Tim Patrick, who has flipped in seamlessly into that third receiver role that was vacated, a season ago by the homeboy that went to Denver, actually, as a matter of fact, Josh Reynolds. Mm-hmm. But there is one interesting note here where there's only one game, obviously, the Lions have lost all season. And really, outside of his 5 interception game against the Houston Texans, where he was 15 of 30, the Bears have did a great job at forcing him to throw the ball more. The Lions are really good when Jared Goff doesn't throw the ball over 30 times.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
I encourage everybody to go look at Jared Goff's games, stat lines for each game. 18 of 28 in the first game of the season. He threw 55 passes against the Buccaneers and they lost, right? You get them to throw the ball more, they lose. But then 23, 18, 25, 25, 15, 22, 30 against the Texans, 29 against the Jags. He threw 36 times against the Colts, but was wicked efficient, 26 of 36. 21 of 34. I mean, that's one of his worst totals of the year. It wasn't so much the Bears getting home and getting sacks, but the QB pressures were there. They forced Goff to get rid of the ball faster than he wanted to. And because the Lions passing game is a lot of timing and tempo and, complex routes that require time, if you force his hand to get rid of the ball sooner, it allows for everything else to just kind of fall into place for your defense. That's kind of what happened in this one. I think they did a good job keeping Jared Goff uncomfortable because, yes, he still threw 2 touchdowns, but if you watch those 2 touchdowns, they were like 6 and 7 yard passes both times. He's just lobbing the ball into the end zone. From there, though, he wasn't very dangerous getting the ball downfield outside of that big play to Amon-Ra St. Brown, which that's just a crazy route, having a guy start running a drag across the field and have him then flare back out almost into like a wheel route. You don't see that a lot in the NFL.
Yeah, I remember watching when that play happened. It was like Tyreek Stevenson seemed very surprised by something about that route. He was just like, it was like he was expecting something very different. Even when the ball was catched, it almost felt like he hesitated, like he expected him to go a different direction. It was weird.
Yeah, I think it was a play that kind of broke the brains of a lot of people that watch football and go, I've never seen that route before. But that's the ingenuity of the Ben Johnson at OC. I digress. I think they did a good job keeping Jared Goff uncomfortable, especially once you took the run game away in the second half, right? It didn't open up the play action. It allowed your front four to, again, they weren't going to always get home. This Lions offensive line is one of the best in football. But the Bears, with just largely a 4-man rush for most of the day, they started to use some blitzes later on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They kept Jared Goff off tempo. And Jared Goff is the perfect on-tempo quarterback. If you take him off tempo, he becomes uncomfortable. And I think they did that well. I really do. I really think they that key to victory, I think they did. There's a reason the Bears had a chance in this game.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think they did a better job in the box score looks. Because, I mean, as you mentioned, when you get him to throw over 30 times, the Lions don't score more than 20 to 25 points when he's throwing a lot. When you look at their scores this year and they're in the 40 and 50 point range, those are the games where Jared Goff is throwing 20 or less passes more often than not.
But because usually, right, when you have a good run game, Jared Goff's able to get more yards because it's the big plays that you're pushing downfield, right? It's the 30 yards, completions to Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's the screens to a guy like Jamison Williams because of his ability after the catch that he's taking for 20, 30 yards, right? Like, a lot of Jared Goff's yards come because of the success of the run game. It's just, it is the way it is. Anybody can go watch the film and you'll see it. The run game sets the tempo. There's a reason they paid David Montgomery and invested a top 20 pick in Jahmyr Gibbs in the NFL draft. That sets your tempo for Jared Goff to do what Jared Goff needs to do. And he can have an efficient game, not throwing the ball over 30 times. We saw it, which week was it here? In the win against the Jaguars. He was 24 of 29, but he threw for 412 yards and 4 touchdowns. Right? I mean, he can be efficient. Jared Goff is not a volume quarterback. He's a quality of volume quarterback. But when you get him to throw for volume, it means that A, the run game's not working. Good job, Bears. And B, it just means that he's probably off tempo, especially when he's only completing roughly half of his passes. So good on the Bears. I really do. I know I'm continuing to beat a dead horse, and the horse is dead. Stop. He's already dead. I understand. I think they did a good job with this game.
Yeah. And so moving from that, Ron, again, do you have any further final thoughts on this game, on where the Bears are going from here?
As long as Caleb continues to look like Caleb every single week, which I think we're going to continue to get, I will at least be able to fall asleep at night and not beat myself up over these Bears wins. But I would be, or Bears losses, pardon me, but I would be absolutely lying to everybody in the comment section, lying to everybody listening at home after the fact or on YouTube at the Untapped Sportsnet YouTube channel, or to you, Q, as my co-host here today. I'd be lying to every single one of you if I didn't tell you that every time the Bears do this shit, a small piece of my soul just gets cut off and like thrown to the metaphorical wolves of the world. It sucks. Watching this team lose sucks. I would like to see them win some games here, and they got a tough schedule coming up. You've got the San Francisco 49ers on the horizon here soon. You've got the Vikings, Packers, and Lions all again here down the stretch as well. And you've got a, maybe not the greatest team on paper, but a feisty, pesky Seattle Seahawks football team as well the day after Christmas. Another Thursday game for this Bears team. Caleb continues to do Caleb things. I think they're going to steal at least maybe 2 of those games here down the stretch. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of my soul will be returned if we get good news on Saturday, which is what sounds like will be the case of when we get said potentially good news, I think, for Bears fans. And then we pivot and we go from there, Q. But I guess in typical Bears on Tap fashion, it is San Francisco next week, right?
I believe so.
Then we're on to San Francisco.
Oh boy, that's a struggling 49ers team right there. That could be interesting in San Francisco. So for final thoughts, I have one. I think it's a good one. We're talking about the Lions. We're talking about the Firestones and the Fords, right? Martha Firestone Ford was the Lions chairperson for years and years. And in, I believe it was 2020, I'm trying to find, so she's 99 right now. So when she was 95 at 2020, she ceded the chairwoman position to her daughter, Sheila Ford Ham. And we know the Lions pre-2020, right? Like, it was Matt Stafford carrying corpses, and it was, a lot of rough football in there. But Sheila Ham Ford takes over. Year 1, 5-11. She gets rid of, in her first move, Matt Patricia and I forget their GM, Bob Quinn, their GM, midseason, and says, we need to shake this up. Goes and pays real money, good money, to go get Dan Campbell. Like, they invested in Dan Campbell. They said with conviction, Dan Campbell is our guy to turn this thing around. Then they turn around and give really good money to their to the GM. They go and take him from the Rams. Yeah, Brad Holmes. Very highly valued guy in this league. Guy who everybody knows as that guy has potential to be a star. He's been in this league for a long time without being a GM yet, and he's got the goods. So they invested in 2 very proven commodities of what they were, in my mind, because they were willing to invest in it. And the assistant coaches behind Campbell, they invested in these guys. They put the money down. They put their money where their mouth was and said, we are fixing this thing. New chairperson, new person in charge of our organization. We are making changes. We're seeing the results before our eyes of someone coming in willing to spend the money that it takes to win. It's not an overly complicated formula in the NFL. If you're willing to invest in every aspect of your organization, you can win football games. You invest in the scouts, the assistant coaches, the player personnel departments, you pay the best to be the best. They're going to do their job well. That's the way that I see it. And when you're constantly going after and this is not to be a slight on Ryan Poles or anything like that, but when you're constantly going after the up and comers who have a bit less knowledge, more to learn, it's always going to be a slower process. And it feels like that Ryan Pace was the up and comer, probably a little cheaper, but he had to learn stuff along the way. Ryan Poles been the same way. Phil Emery was probably more I think when George first came in, I think he was more willing to do that. Like, I think they paid good money for a little outside the box stuff with Phil Emery and Mark Trestman. They were bad decisions, but they've felt scared to make that type of investment ever since then. And I'm not sure that that is really the way to go. And I just wish they had a little more Sheila Fordham in there of like, we're going to bang our head against the wall until we figure it out, because like we need to start winning for this city. And they haven't won for this city in a while, the Bears.
Q, you know how I think we sum your final thought up?
What's that?
Scared money don't make money.
Precisely. Scared money don't make money. And the Bears have felt like scared money for the last, and not from I feel like people are going to come at this saying, what are you talking about? They gave Mac a giant contract. They pay guys in free agency. I'm not talking about salary cap moves, because you are mandated by the league to spend the majority of the salary cap across every 3 years. That's money you have to spend. It's just a question of where you allocate that money. I'm talking about the non-cap cash decisions. And, they buy Arlington Heights. Great. Like that seemed like a step in the right direction. It's kind of not, it doesn't look like anything's actually happening there now. And like that, it's not about the stadium as much as the people in your organization. I feel like has been lacking investment for the last, probably since Trestman left, because I think Trestman was the last guy that they really invested in, Trestman and Emery and their staff around.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I think there's, it's the cheap decisions behind the scenes that really continue to hurt them. And, they can make the argument, well, on the field, we're spending what we need to spend. Right. And it's like, no, but you need to, you need to invest in the people behind the scenes that make the decisions, because if it's crap in, crap out, right? It's kind of the same idea. Not to say that Ryan Poles can't be a great GM. I think he's done a lot of good things at the GM spot here for the Chicago Bears. I feel that, I felt the same way about, Ryan Pace and even Matt Nagy. I thought Matt Nagy was a good head coach. I just thought he was a poor play caller, but that's where that ego and stubbornness came into play. And I told you, that'll kill you as an NFL head coach. And I think that's what happened ultimately there. I think there's a world where they can get there. And maybe some of it's for the McCaskies because they don't have any money outside of the Bears. The Bears are their moneymaker. Maybe that's why the stadium for them is such a big deal, because then they own the stadium, especially if you get in Arlington Heights. You own the stadium. That's all raw, organic cash flow that you have coming in 24/7, 365 from whatever you build out there. Then you can make those investments off the field because you have the money coming in. I hope sooner than later they understand that, even if it means taking a loss for a little while before taking a gain. But you put it beautifully, Q. The lines are the blueprint of, if you want to turn something around and you do the proper moves and you invest in the proper people, things are going to typically go in the right direction. That's exactly what's happening in Detroit.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I got to leave it, because like you said, I look at what Hampford has done with Detroit and say, there's a clear difference in the way that they're spending, in the way that the attitude they bring to their facility from the top to the bottom, that thrives throughout that beats. That's a heartbeat for that organization.
And you hear Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell talk about Sheila Fordham all the time. They reference our ownership. It really is from the top down. And I know it was said a little bit earlier, and I'm going to bring it back up again. Nothing changes until the McCaskies sell the team, or they have a pivot and change of heart on how to do this thing. But if anybody's showing them that it can be done, it continues to be the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, they're doing great stuff over there. But this is the Chicago Bears podcast. Ron, what do you say we get out of here the classic way that we know how?
Fire Flus and bear down, baby.
Bear down.